One of the more common questions I get about methylene blue isn't simply about what it is. It's does it work and whether or not your response is something that is useful information or something that's just a misread signal. You'll hear people describe very clear effects, sharper focus, better memory, even better sleep quality. And then you'll see someone else who takes the exact same supplement and dose and feels almost nothing. I'm Dr. Kenny, an IFM certified functional medicine practitioner, and I tend to look at these situations less in terms of is this good or bad or does this work, and more in terms of fit. What role something is actually playing inside a system. If you watched part one, you already understand this systems-based lens. We explored why responses differ and oxidative stress and mitochondrial capacity playing a huge role, as well as why does it work is the wrong question entirely. This video is the next layer. I want to walk you through how I personally use methylene blue, where I found it useful, and how to interpret your own response in a way that actually reflects what's happening underneath with this systems-based lens. We're moving beyond should I use this or not to more of what happens when I do and what does that tell me. Your response to a supplement like methylene blue or any other isn't random. It reflects the condition of the system that it is entering. This reframe is incredibly useful when it comes to natural healing approaches because most people evaluate a supplement by whether or not they felt something. Supplements work differently. When people do feel a strong response to methylene blue, it tends to show up in a very specific way. It's not just more energy in a general sense, it's often more organized and accessible energy. Focus feels cleaner, like you're burning the premium fuel, and you can stay on a task without as much internal drift and distraction. This is something that I personally experienced, and there's a huge physiological basis for that. In fact, human imaging studies have shown that low doses of methylene blue can increase activity in brain regions involving attention and short-term memory. Essentially, it improves the way your brain's networks are connected and communicating, not just how much energy is available, but how it's being allocated efficiently as well. If you're one who likes the research, I've included a few of the articles I used for this particular video in the pinned comment and the description below. I give my take on the articles as well as a link to them if you want to check them out yourself. This energy theme is something I noticed personally when starting methylene blue. This wasn't something I used early on in my healing journey either. I came back to it after spending years working on other systems, including my digestion and my overall resilience and hormonal set points. I've found myself more centered and focused, creating videos or systems or even talking to patients and being extra present. I've even noticed small changes in my sleep recovery data as well as my heart rate variability. These are all clues to me that what it's helped to do is unlock more potential in my energy creation now that I've set the stage and the tone in my systems to be able to receive the signal of methylene blue. But that clarity and free flow piece is often what tends to mislead people as well, because feeling a benefit is often taken as proof of what was missing, my low energy being a methylene blue deficiency. But that's not exactly what that response is truly showing us. Probably heard this in other areas before. When something helps, it must be the thing that your body needed. A strong response does not necessarily confirm a root cause. It confirms that your system was simply able to respond, and those are not the same thing. A little nuance here. In many cases, a compound like methylene blue is interacting with a part of your physiology that's already responsive and amplifies that signal. So it feels like progress perhaps, but maybe the underlying constraint hasn't been addressed. That improvement tends to be limited or situational or dependent on continuing the same input. And this just creates dependency. That's not the goal with deep root cause healing. In part one, we also talked about 3 general responses to methylene blue: the clear shift, the minimal response, or the incomplete one that doesn't stick. If you haven't seen that, I encourage you to go back to it as well. What I want to focus on is what those patterns point to clinically as well, because that's where this becomes more actionable. If your response is clear and clean. This usually tells me that there's already a decent foundation in place. The system had enough stability to translate that input of the methylene blue into something usable that you could perceive. That's useful information, not because the compound itself is the answer, but because it suggests your system is able to burn that energy cleanly. It's in a position to respond to these targeted inputs. If you felt very little, that's not a failure of methylene blue or your systems. It usually means the pathway being influenced by methylene blue isn't the primary bottleneck as to why your energy is particularly drained. Something else upstream or underneath is what's driving your fatigue. And until that's addressed, efficiency level tools won't manage that meaningfully. And if you felt something but it didn't hold, that's usually the most revealing pattern that we're living between these two experiences. It suggests that your system is responsive enough to shift, but it doesn't have the reserve to sustain it. And there may be other underlying factors at play. It usually points to foundational inputs like movement, adequate recovery, and stress regulation needing more consistency before something like methylene blue can do its most efficient job. This is the distinction that frames the way I think about timing with these tools. When I first encountered methylene blue, I didn't have the foundation personally to use it well. And this is something I had already worked with theoretically. The system it would have been entering wasn't ready for that kind of input. I needed to spend more dedicated time on the layers that are required to remove any roadblocks in our energy production chemistry. And this includes gut health and function, or stress chemistry and nervous system regulation, even sleep quality architecture. And this is the type of theory that I apply to my patients as well. This distinction, when it comes to natural healing and supporting longevity as well, matters more than most people realize. When something is used as leverage or a healing tool, it builds on what's already present and working underneath. If you've tried something that should have worked, but it didn't, this is usually part of that explanation. It's not that the tool itself was inherently wrong. It's that the timing didn't match the readiness of the system. So here's what my actual use looks like. Not as a protocol recommendation, because there's really no one size fits all to natural healing and longevity, but as context for how I think about fit. I personally use methylene blue in low doses in a capsulated form intermittently. It's not a daily experience. It's not as a foundational tool either. It sits on top of everything else after sleep, stress regulation, healthy boundaries, movement, and nutrition. Those are all dialed in. Not perfect, but the foundation is there. I tend to use it most on days where sustained energy output, especially my cognitive output, matters most. On my complex patient days, strategic planning for the business, or even YouTube scripting and content creation. And I don't use it as a crutch, but really as a tool for refinement and optimization. The base is there, and ultimately this is a tool to use to get me to the next level. And another important thing is that I do cycle it. We'll talk more about dosing strategies in a future video in this series, but this is one of the things that gets missed in these conversations around supplements in general. Our systems do have the potential to adapt to consistent inputs over time, and of course we want to prevent that from stifling any consistent benefit over time. This kind of self-monitoring and tuning into oneself is also where the real value of natural healing and supplementation often lives. It's not in the compound itself. It's learning to read how your system responds and what it's telling you through this process. Once you look at methylene blue this way, or really any supplement, it's difficult to see them the same way. You're no longer asking whether or not it simply worked. You're looking at what the response is showing you, especially in your systems underneath and over time. If you've been evaluating this experience as a pass-fail experience, this is where the value of the nuance breaks down. The response itself isn't a simple black and white conclusion, it is information to iterate on. And if we follow this idea one step further, the next question isn't really about the compound itself anymore. It's about where methylene blue acts and what action is it actually having on our chemistry and our function. And this is where we turn our focus again to mitochondria. That's exactly what this video here on your screen walks you through, how mitochondrial dysfunction develops across multiple systems and why it often shows up long before anything ever gets flagged on conventional labs. It is the root of many chronic conditions that we experience today. I'm Dr. Kenny, Root Cause Health Detective. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.